Welcome back to FURYCAST. But first, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and of course, smash the bell for notifications. You can also comment on this video and let it play to the end. I have a good one for you today. He tried to break into comics in the 90s, and for the last 10 years, he was the lead singer of the metal band Mine Enemies Fall. Now, he's the creator of the hit indie comic Reaper Destroyer. Today on FURYCAST, I have Mr. Joe Sonntag. Tell me a little bit about yourself. How'd you grow up, man, and what eventually led you into comic books?
Well, I grew up in a small town called Gobles. I don't even know how many people lived there. It was pretty small. Small time living for a while. I got into drawing probably when I was, like 6 or 7, when you start dabbling in things. But I really got into comic books around like 8 years old or so. I met a boy that was older than me at the time who introduced me to comic books, and he used to draw as well. And as a kid, I always thought he was like the best artist I'd ever seen, right? Just somebody that could draw the comic book characters and everything. So I got really into drawing from him, and he kind of showed me the ropes a little bit and just kind of normal structure. He might have had like how to draw comics the Marvel way. I can't remember if he did or not, but
Everybody did.
yeah. I'm sure he did, like so long ago, and like trying to remember all this stuff. But he got me into comics, and I fell in love with the medium of comic books, the fantasy adventure, especially that age, and your imagination is so fantastic at the time. Like in your mind, all that stuff could still possibly happen, right? Like you're growing up thinking, you're like, oh, I could be Batman one day. Like I could totally be Batman one day, or I could be Spider-Man, like all this kind of stuff. So
I could be a ninja.
I could be a Ninja Turtle, is what I thought.
Even better.
So, but there would be times where I would just spend hours in my room just reading comic books and drawing and just getting lost in it. I fell in love with it at an early age, and it stuck throughout most of my life. When I was in my teens, I really started like heavily pursuing drawing. Like I knew at that point I wanted to be a comic book artist, like right around like 12, 13, something like that. So I spent most of my teens just drawing forever, just trying to increase my skill based on like all the guys I was into at the time, like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and Ty McFarlane and all those guys.
The big
and
three
yeah
of our generation, that is.
yeah, exactly. Yep. Anybody's around our age, like I'm 40 years old, but so if anybody's around that age, those were like the guys in the early 90s, right? Like everybody wanted to be one of those 3 guys. And so I mean, it was one of those things, I found the passion for it, and I spent most of my hours in my room. My mom had to kick me outside a ton of times because I'd just be in front of my makeshift drawing table, which my dad built, by the way. Shout out to my dad for helping me that out early on. He was a carpenter, so before I was able to buy like actual drafting tables and stuff like that, he made one for me, and I'd put it in my corner of my room, and I'd have my little studio all set up with all these images I would draw, inspiration, posters I'd pull out of comic books and all that kind of stuff, just all around. And, in my mind, I was living the life,
That might be the best thing I've ever heard a father give to a son. You know what I mean? That might be the absolute best gift ever.
Oh, it was awesome. He also built me a light box at one point too. He looked up like how to make a light box, and he figured it all out, built it for me. So most of the stuff I had early on in my life was all things my dad built me. I didn't really
go buy
out
him a 99-cent card for Father's Day.
Yeah. yeah, exactly. So yeah, it was pretty cool. Both my parents were extremely supportive of anything I did in life, but at that point in time, like I was heavily into comic books and art. My mom took me to my first convention when I was 14. I think that was how old I was when I went to my very first comic book convention. And I think it was around Dearborn, or maybe it was Novi, somewhere in Michigan. And I got to meet Jim Lee and Dan Fraga, and J. Scott Campbell was there, and that was a crazy experience.
So when other kids are like trying to meet their favorite ball player, or what I mean, or trying to stand in line to get a Ken Griffey Jr. autograph, you were meeting Jim Lee. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, like I had a So the closest town to us, or like bigger city, if you want to call it, was like 40 minutes away. And we would go there maybe like once a month. My mom would take me to the local comic book store there once a month, and I'd just spend, hours there looking at comics, buying comics, and all that stuff. And there was a flyer for this convention. I can't remember what it was called at the time, but on the flyer, one of the big guest names was Jim Lee. And at the time, that was the dude.
This
Like
was
that was the guy.
X-Men run, Jim Lee.
This was actually
Image.
this would have been when Image was still going on. I think he had just come back to Marvel with Rob Liefeld for the Heroes Reborn stuff
Yeah.
in '96.
That was the height of his powers. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, he was the man, and he was like the big name on this convention. And yeah, I remember grabbing it and taking my mom. I was just like, can we go to this? Like, like, is this a possibility? Like, Jim Lee is going to be there. Like, I didn't care about anybody else. Like, I saw J. Scott Campbell's name and everything, but I saw Jim Lee, and it was like, it was over. It's like, I got to meet this dude. So, yeah, she bought tickets and took me there. And we stood in line. We went in. My mom brought a bunch of books to read, and she went to like the cafeteria part of the convention and just sat there. And I just walked around. It was a different era, when you could kind of let your kids go without worry at the time. And I just walked around and just took it all in, soaked it all in, met a bunch of cool people. And then I stood in line for Jim Lee and got my X-Men #1, Wildcats #1 signed, shook his hand, engaged in a little bit of small talk, as much as a 14-year-old could do to like an idol, meeting his idol for the first time. It was a great experience. Like my growing up was awesome. Just being in comics and drawing and shit. And then obviously I tried getting into comics in my late teens, early 20s, started sending out samples. Didn't really know what I was doing. I just tried to find an address in the back of a comic somewhere, and then send stuff out. I get rejection letters from Marvel. I remember the first time I got a letter back from Marvel, it was so exciting, before you opened it, before I opened it, and it had the heartbreak, but just getting an official letter back from Marvel. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, thinking to myself, like, this could be it, kid stuff.
Did you keep any of the rejection letters?
I didn't actually, no, because it's funny too, because I've heard so many stories, like Tom McFarlane's stories of all his rejections, and over 300 or whatever. And a lot of people kept their rejection letters. It just wasn't a thing to me. Like it was like disappointing, but it wasn't like I didn't need the extra motivation. Like I wasn't like, I'm gonna hold on to this because this is gonna really motivate me to get better. It was just one of those things. Like I didn't really keep stuff like that back in the day. I was just like, oh, that sucks, and then just kind of went in the trash and kept on working, kept on building up my portfolio and sending out samples. Sometimes I'd never hear back from anybody. Marvel at least sent me back. I think I got back something from DC too. Obviously rejection, but most of the places I just sent out didn't send anything back, which is fine. And go to the convention, show your work, talk to people. I tried to break in as old school of ways you can.
Yeah, that's the old school method. You go to the
back
convention,
in the day.
you shake hands.
Yep. Yeah, I'd show my work to whoever would want to look at it, and a lot of times it was cool because a lot of artists back in the day would, and maybe they still do now. I don't know. I just haven't haven't done that in a while, but the first person I ever showed my work to was Norm Brayfogle, former, rest in peace, by the way. He passed away a few years back, but it was a Batman artist in the 90s. Worked on the Prime at Malibu and just a bunch of stuff. But he was super cool, looked at my portfolio, and he actually took the time to give me tips and talk about my work, and not just, whatever. It was the coolest experience. The very first guy, I just happened to be walking up to Artist Alley or just where I was at, and he's just the first dude. He was standing there, nobody was around his table, so I went up and I was like, hey, do you mind looking at my work? And he did, and it was really cool. And I remember one thing he said to me that was very inspirational, and I took it going forward after that point, is he kind of gave me tips of what to work on and like all this kind of stuff. But he said I had a very natural storytelling ability in my work, and how I just laid out the pages and stuff like that. And he's like, I can tell you just have this very natural skill. And he's like, keep it up, because you're gonna be very, very good one day. And I remember that just being like the coolest thing to ever hear, because at that point everybody that looked at my work was like, my parents, my friends, and you're always going to get great feedback, from the people that know you and love you and all that kind of stuff.
The guy that built you the drafting table is definitely gonna
yeah, exactly.
say it's good.
Exactly. So So that was super cool, just going in there, and then a bunch of other artists I met. The artists were always very kind, very, willing to give you some tips and say, hey, this is really good, work on this, all that kind of stuff. And then you get to editors, and that was a completely different story. Editors didn't care about your feelings whatsoever. I mean, you go from this high of talking to other artists and like thinking to yourself, like, oh, I'm doing really good, I'm on the right track, maybe I'm this close, kind of thing. And you go to an editor, and it's just like, oh my, they took pleasure in just tearing my art apart. Basically, people like calling it trash. Like, one dude said I shouldn't even be showing my work. He's like, dude, you're not even at a level where you should show your work to anybody. He's like, he handed it back to me. He's like, you're not ready. And I'm like, oh, well, thanks for the helpful criticism there, buddy. It was a dark horse guy. I don't even know who it was, but yeah, it was those experiences were not as fun. That's for sure. But
It was part of the process, though. Huh?
It's part of the process. You got to have thick skin when it comes to that stuff. You can't take anything personal. I remember, like, obviously having my feelings hurt at the time, and being, I was probably discouraged at the time, but just I always had self-determination to do the stuff I wanted to, no matter what anybody said, whether it was positive or negative. If I wanted to do something, I was going to always pursue to do it, no matter what. So it was always good having that positive reinforcement. But if somebody came out negative like that, and when I say negative, these guys weren't giving me tips on how to get better. These guys were just telling me how much it sucked, and that's it. So like there was no help whatsoever. No, hey, come back in 6 months, work on this, come back in 6 months, send me this. There was none of that. It was just, like these editors were straight up just, a-holes. Like it was night and day difference. And this was at the time, we're talking early 2000s now, when I was actually confident enough to go to conventions by myself as a young adult, and take myself to conventions and show my work off. So I don't know what was going on in the industry that during that time, if it was different, or maybe that wasn't the way to go about doing it anymore. I don't know. It's just that was the only way I'd ever known. I read all the articles of how all my heroes got their jobs, going to conventions, showing their work, and I was like, this is the way you do it. So
I think it just has to do with just when you're an artist, you know what it's like to be an artist, and plus we're emotional. I mean, you play music as well. It's like you can't make music, can't make good art without being like an emotional human being, right?
True.
But then you take an editor and you hire somebody and you tell them your whole job is to critique and tell and not to put in but to take out. To edit, to remove, so then they run across a 19-year-old Joe Sonntag, and it's like we'll just remove him.
That's basically what it was like. So all that did is, I kept on doing what I was doing. And I decided at that point, I can never remember his name. There was, do you remember the artist that drew the comic book Dawn? Remember Dawn it was an independent book from the late 90s, early 2000s.
I must have missed that.
Joseph Michael Linsner.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph Michael Linsner, I think is his name. He was at a couple conventions, and every year I'd go there and I'd hang out with him. He was a really cool guy, and he'd let me stay at his table and we'd just talk. He never really had a lot of people at his table. But I also, his work was cool with Dawn. It was very kind of painterly style. And he was very, very bitter at the industry. And I remember him specifically telling me, he was like, dude, it has nothing to do with your skill level or talent. He's like, it's all who you know in this industry. He's like, I'm telling you straight up. He's like, it's who you know to get into the industry. He's like, that's it. He's like, you could be the best artist in the world. He's like, you don't know the right people, you're never going to get somebody to look at your work. And I remember leaving the convention that year and really thinking about that. And I was like, well, if that's the case, and I've already had problems breaking in the industry, and at this point I was 21, 22, something like that, so I've been working at it, trying to get into a while, and I'm thinking of like all my heroes have already had careers at this age, and that was one of the things. Like Liefeld was already a millionaire at 22, 23, just doing the stuff he was doing and all that kind of stuff. And I'm looking at this thinking to myself, like, wow, I'm running out of time here. So I decided to go kind of the Joseph Michael Lenzer route, and other guys like Billy Tushy and all these guys are doing indie stuff. I was like, I'm just gonna start making my own book. And you know, I'm gonna use that as a platform to try to get into the industry, because I'll make my own book, I'll publish it. If people like it, you know, maybe I'll get some heat that way, and you know, get some job offers, and you know, so on and so forth.
And that goes all the way back to like the 60s, right? With R. Crumb and the whole,
Oh yeah.
you
You
know.
know, the indies were always a really good way of at least getting out there, because you know, the editors, whoever, they want to see a body of work. You know, I could take them as many sample pages as I wanted. And you know, maybe I'm improving, maybe I'm not, but like if I was at least doing an independent book and putting stuff out there, I could at least show, you know, progress. I could show work. I'd be like, look, I've handled this amount on my own. You know, like I have a experience, you know, even if it
Yeah.
was indies, like at least it's experience more than just putting together 3 pages here, 3 pages there, and some pinups, you know, and taking it and
Yeah.
like, here's my portfolio.
Well, it's the same thing with filmmaking. Look, I've made a movie. I've taken a project from start to
Right.
finish. You know, I can do it again.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. You know, so I started thinking like that was my best way to get into the industry at the time. So I started working on a character, which incidentally now at 40 years old, I'm doing again. But at the time, my character Reaper Destroyer, I just designed one day. I was bored, much like artists do. I'm sure I'm not the only one, where we sit down at the drawing table, don't really know what we want to draw, so we just start drawing, and we just start putting stuff in that looks cool because we're drawing a certain pose. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna do this because this will be cool, and blah blah blah. And eventually I drew something. I'm looking at it, and I'm like, wow, that's actually pretty cool. You know, like it had like some kind of Moon Knight feel and like some other kind of stuff. And so I took it and started just developing a concept, and off of just this sketch that I did, you know, it was really cool because it developed this whole world and an aspect. I got really excited about it. So I'm like, you know, I'm going to make this into a comic book. Like this is going to be the thing I'm going to do to be an independent, you know, comic book creator. And I'm going to put this book out, and that's going to be my main focus. So I started doing that in my early 20s. I met a bunch of other amateur guys like me that were trying to break into the industry, you know, inkers and colorists and other con veterans, I guess you could say, that I got on board that really liked what we're doing. They liked my art at the time. So we put together a preview book and went to, at this point now, where it's 2007. I think I'm 23. I might have been 24. I can't remember. And we went to this convention. I'm showing my work. You know, I think I printed like 50 books, you know, and took it to the convention just to see if I could sell any. And I think I sold 30 of them. And people seem to dig it. You know, funny stories. So Jim Valentino was there. This was actually a really cool convention. This is Wizard World Chicago 2007. There were a lot of big names there that year. Like Liefeld was there. I think Turner was there. A bunch of bunch of the Image guys, I think, were there. And I get word that Jim Valentino is at his table in Artist Alley. And I don't think he is the president of Image or the editor-in-chief or whatever he was at the time. At this point, I can't remember. But I remember my inker was really excited. He was like, dude, grab a copy of the book. Let's go talk to him. Like, give him the book. Let's talk to him. And I was just like, all right. So we went over there, and I walk up to him, and he didn't seem like he was in a good mood at all, which was probably a bad sign. But we give him the book, and he's flipping through it and everything. And he's just he was just like, he's like, well, your colorist doesn't know what he's doing. The inks suck. He's like, the art's okay. When he kind of looks up after flipping through this book and just, and he hands it back. He's like, yeah. He's like, come back again another time. It's like, all right, thank you, man. Appreciate it. It's another one of those situations. But again, that kind of stuff, it just more than anything just kind of made me laugh. And looking back, you know, I'm proud of that work. But he's right. It wasn't professional ready, you know. So, but
Which is funny because if you like 10 years earlier, like in the 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, it not being ready, that like kind of like feel to it
yeah.
is what sold books, you
Oh
know.
yeah. What's funny about the industry is, you farther back you go, you have eras where they would develop talent, or they would take chances on things, and maybe it was a safer time to take chances on stuff. Maybe the money was better, maybe sales were better all around, so it allowed publishers to be like, okay, you know, we'll take a chance on this. We'll see what happens. You know, if it gets canceled, it get canceled, or you know, we'll bring this young artist on. He's got potential. We're gonna try to, you know, develop his skills and see what, you know, which is a lot of the image guys brought in so many big names. Now they're big names, but guys that nobody had heard of before, like Turner and Booth and Scott Campbell and Finch and like all these guys, and they brought them in. They developed their skills and, you know, let them grow. At some point though, that like, no, they were done with that. They wanted sure things. Like, is this going to sell? Is this going to make money or not? If it's not, move on. You know, and that's kind of the era where I think I fell into when I was trying to break into the industry and kind of, you know, get my comic book looked at or picked up by anybody. Was just like, is it ready to sell? Is it ready now to put on the shelves? You know, like, and then obviously the amount of money it takes for an independent creator to actually get their book on his shelf, even if it gets picked up. That's another thing nobody tells you about until you're, you know, you get faced with it, or people start telling you the actual business side of comic books. So yeah, I think it was just the era, you know, like the early mid 2000s was an interesting like transitional era for the comic book industry. Maybe, you know, transitioning to the bad, in my opinion, from what it was in the 90s, which was this juggernaut, you know, just explosive industry, or everything was hit, you know, like everything was selling. Like it was just an amazing time in comics. And you get just 10 years later, 2000s, and it just completely changed.
I don't know what to say other than like you want to like lament the 90s,
You
lament,
do,
you know,
dude.
just
I've got a YouTube channel under Joe Sonntag. All I do is talk about 90s comic book art, because to me that was the last uh decade where everything was exciting and fun and new and energetic. You know, there's so much energy in the industry. I mean, you felt it when you read the comic books, or when you saw the art, you felt that, you know. And that's the last decade I remember it being like that. And it's not just because, you know, young man Joe now is getting older, and now you know, now you're shaking your hands at all the young stuff. It's just there's a complete difference with the industry now than what it used to be. And it's just, I think everybody that wants to see it can see it, you know, like it's pretty obvious.
now that leads me into the state of the industry today. What are we already kind of know your opinion. I can guess your opinion, but I mean, of course, there'll always be outliers of some really good stuff, some really good creators doing
Oh
some
yeah.
good thing. But what's your overall view of comics today, and what do you think is the issue?
Well, comic books are there. It's just, it's really, it's just sad what it is today from what I grew up, you know, from what I always envisioned what the industry was supposed to be. Um, it might not be a popular topic or anything, but I think modern politics have come into comic books quite a bit. And it's not so much that comic books have not been like political throughout the history of comic books, but it's more so there's a preachiness to comic book writers these days, you know. And I think what a lot of irks a lot of fans and irks me is that you have a lot of people coming into the comic book industry that might not actually have a love for comic books. It might be, you know, it's a stepping stone for them to get somewhere else, like to, you know, to prove their work so they can get into, you know, TV or movie writing and stuff like that. And so they treat it that way. They don't treat the characters with respect. They don't treat them like, you've got some characters that have 60, 70 years worth of history behind them, of established history of who these characters are, and they want to come in and do deconstruction, or, you know, just write them in a way, try to modernize them, you know, for whatever their beliefs might be. And which is, you know, that's fine if you want to create new characters, you know, and but people don't create new characters anymore because new characters are hard to sell. And that's the thing. If you listen to the industry, they will straight up tell you that new characters are hard to sell. That's why you don't see a lot of brand new characters. Like, again, let's go back to the 90s, where the 90s were just full of new characters coming on the scene and just exploding and having their own titles and like all this kind of stuff. That's what I kind of grew accustomed to. Now they don't want to take the chance on something, you know, not having that dollar return, I guess you could say. Not that the industry is really raking in a bunch of money, but they would rather take the already established characters that everyone knows: Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, the X-Men, and well, let's just go mess with these characters. Let's go change these characters up a little bit. Let's put our own ideals in there, and let's become very, very preachy. The thing about entertainment, regardless of whatever anybody thinks, political, religious, whatever, throw that all out the window. Entertainment is supposed to be literally for everybody. It's your escape from all the stuff that we have to deal with in the regular world on a daily basis. We get bombarded, especially with social media and the internet. We just get bombarded every single day, in everything now, with the political stuff and whatever. Like, there's no escape anymore. And you turn to comic books where you want to read about fantastic stories and superpowered heroes or dark heroes or just whatever. You want to get lost for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, however long it takes you to read a book or a graphic novel. You just want to get lost in it and just forget all the BS that's going on in the world. But you can't, because certain people have come into the entertainment industry and put that into all of entertainment. So now there is absolutely no escape from that. It's just constantly this person's opinion or this person's opinion, and if you don't agree with me, then you're a bad person and blah, blah, blah. Like that's all it is now. Entertainment in general, but comic books are like that. Not all comics. There are some good stuff, like I don't want to just sit here and disparage the entire thing, because there are good books out there, and some people don't see it that way. Some people just see the entertainment value of it and don't really pay attention to the political aspect. And that's cool. That's good. I'm glad those people don't get affected by it. But some of us that do, I think the majority of us that do, the majority of us that start seeing our favorite characters not act the same way that they're supposed to act, because it's a new generation or whatever. I take issue with that. It's no longer fun for me. Fortunately, we got a ton of old comics we can read, which, but the now industry is just, it, I don't know. It's all fake. It's funny as that is to say about comic books, and we're all talking about fake characters. The industry now is fake. I don't see love behind these characters like there were. Creators back in the day, writers back in the day loved these characters. They loved writing these characters and developing these characters and telling a story. Now I think it's just a means to an end.
Yeah, and as a filmmaker myself, I do get the vibe that I'm reading certain comics and like, this is a pitch. This
Yeah.
comic, it's a pitch for a Netflix series or a possible film.
Yeah.
But as a filmmaker, it's like, in that space, it's even making movies, it's so hard to make money. Like,
Yeah.
If only the top 10% of people are making a living in comics, only the top 2 are making it in film. Yeah, and also I'll read certain comics and as a writer myself, and it's like, man, you really have to respect the character. How is this how the character would talk? Is this how the character would think and process? Is this how the character would behave?
Right. Exactly.
I don't really see a lot of that anymore. You're reading the comic and I'm actually hearing the voice of the writer in my head.
Yes. Yep.
Because this character would not behave like this,
Right. And that's the thing that I don't want to see, and I don't think a lot of other people want to either. When a character changes from writer to writer in such a way that it's the writer projecting themselves now into the character, where great writers back in the day, you're talking about like Chris Claremont's and like all going, even more modern guys, if you want to call them modern, like Jeff Loeb, some of the guys, Jeff Johns, people that I still think when you read their comics, it's the characters. The characters sound like the characters. It's represented how they would be going back 20 years reading the comic book. That's not to say you can't develop characters and do new life situations and all that kind of stuff, but it's the same thing, with a person. Like, we all change as we grow older, but we still, for the most part, stay the same people. We still, stay the same kind of ideals, the same kind of personalities. Something I'm saying today, you catch me saying it when I was 18, maybe in a different way, because I'm a little bit more, wiser to the world now. But there's a change there that happens in these characters modern day, because new writers are coming in and saying like, I think this character would do this now. Where it's like, there's no evidence in the past of this character ever doing that. So why is this now happening, except for you were just now putting your own spin because it's what you want the character to do, not because you're writing the character for the fans out there. They're spending their hard-earned money. And comics aren't cheap anymore. They keep going up in price. So people are spending their hard-earned money, and you're just giving them, in my opinion, garbage a lot of times.
Now, should we blame the writer or should we blame the editor? Should we blame the company?
I blame
Because
everybody. You can go right up to the editors, yeah, because they they have a lot of say in the matter as well. Well, books are poorly edited nowadays. Like I don't even get it either. I mean, you get spelling errors, you get lots of issues in comic books these days as well. So it's like, what are the editors doing? Um, I don't know exactly who to blame without going to like political stuff, which I don't want to do. But I'll just say it like this. I think the people that kind of put this stuff into motion take a small portion of the readership or the country or whatever you want to say and view that as their demographic when it's not. And then you cater to that demographic or to that voice. And when you get backlash, it's because you have just discounted the entirety of your actual reader population. And you're trying to please a small percentage that aren't the ones pouring hundreds and hundreds of dollars into your product like this group of people are here. It's like, so if you take the voices of Twitter and think that Twitter represents America, which or whatever your reader base, which it doesn't, but because you are so focused on certain platforms, you live in a bubble and you hear those voices, so you think something's going to be really great. And when it's not, it's because the real readers are coming out and saying like, hey, this is garbage. Superman doesn't do this, or Batman doesn't do this, or this is not what Spider-Man and Mary Jane are like, whatever. It's because he's got these passionate readers who have grown up with these characters for whatever 15-20 years in some cases, are seeing the characters absolutely changed and destroyed, which is, we have a right as a readers to not like that. You have a right to stand up and be like, this is not, the comic books in some cases, you have those everyone hears these stories, right, of someone be like, my life was changed because of this comic book, or the way this character was written made me want to be a better person, or made me see this, or blah blah blah. Like that was great about comic books in the past. You had legitimate heroes that you could look up to that would do the right things, in life situations. And now a lot of that's just changed because it's just, I don't know, we live in a more cynical society, a more pessimistic society. I don't know, whatever it is. You go really deep and philosophical with it if you wanted to, which I'm trying not to do.
no, I
But
hear you.
yeah, it starts from the top. I mean, it's just, it is what it is. It's the industry is at a point right now where I don't think it's not gonna come back anytime soon. So it's just what it is now.
We
you
won't
know.
see the 90s.
No, we'll never see that return. The most I would say is I see a lot of the excitement in indie comic books right now, more than anything, because that's, you have true passionate creators still going out and trying to tell the stories that they grew up loving, and then creating their own characters to do that with. So
You're definitely not a newbie to this game. So my question is, all those experience you've had, has that led you, is that why you're part of CG now?
yeah, I mean, this funny thing about CG is it gets a lot of, if people don't know about it, you hear the narrative of, which I think is a false narrative. CG is kind of just the respect of fans kind of movement. And there is, like I said before, this voice of the fans out there that want to see their characters being treated right, or they want to see this kind of stories. Basically, they don't want to get preached to by whatever, because we all have different views, different opinions. We've been brought up different ways, and that's fine. Like there should be no separation there between us as people, as friends, as readers, as Americans. And I think that's the problem right now, is the entertainment world, comic books, so divisive in nature, and it's like, come back to when comic books were truly for everybody. When I mean that, it's just like the story was for everybody. Let's have fun stories without narratives, without political narratives, without me trying to tell you what to think based on what I think you should think or how I should think you should feel. That's how I kind of view what CG is, so the narrative of whatever it is, I would say, don't buy into that. Don't just take that for word. Jump into some CG streams and see what people are actually about. Like it's really a community of people that just want to create comic books for everybody. Make stories that are fun to read, and get lost in that excitement again. Like I've said before, if anybody watches my channel, I look at a lot of the 90s stuff. what I'm doing now in my book, or what I'm reading in other people's independent books. It could be CG, it could be independent just in general, but there's a feeling of excitement there that I haven't felt since the 90s. It's that the creative buzz, the fun stories, the cool characters, and you can actually get lost in the story and appreciate the story for what it is. You can actually see character development and just have fun reading comic books again. To me, that's what CG is, in a nutshell. Respect the fans, produce good work for everybody, no political motives.
Well, and as a creator, it seems to be a lot of communal, communal nature to it. Everybody supporting each other, and
Yeah.
and come on my stream, you come on your stream, support my book, you support your. Everybody's building a synergy within Comicsgate that's interesting.
Yeah, really what what CG is to me, what the streams are. So the streaming it's a very unique thing. That this has become such a thing now with streaming. It's much like going to a convention and hanging out with a bunch of creators, independent creators, whether you're in Artist Alley or whatever, and then just talking comic books, nerding out, about the industry, about the artists you love, about characters you love, hearing about somebody else's character. One of the funnest things to me is to sit down and to hear somebody else talk about their characters and their stories and the worlds that they're building. Because it's enjoyable. You sit there and you're like, oh wow, like that's awesome. Like that is awesome, man. Like that sounds really cool. Like I can't wait to read that. Like it's it's just a fun place, and it is very incestual is what I like to say, because everyone's all over the place, like everyone goes to everybody's channel, you're in the chat, you're hanging out, you're supporting one another. Um, it's a fun community. I met some very awesome people, some awesome creators, not just creators. I mean, it's the majority of people in CG are fans, or they don't want to make comic books. They just want to read good comic books. They want to hang out with people, and get to know good people. And that's really more what it is. It's a network, I'd say, more than anything, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So you're the
Mhm.
writer and artist on Reaper Destroyer, correct?
Yeah, yep. Writer, artist, creator. I do work with a writer, Mark Polton, because, and I've said this before, that I on my book, I've tried to go out and get people that are stronger in their positions than I am on the book. But I want the book to look as best as it absolutely can. And I will admit that although I'm the writer on the book, I don't consider myself a writer. Like I didn't learn how to write, like all the different forms and like how you develop all this kind of stuff. What I could do, what I could do since I was a kid, because you read comic books so much, is you could tell a story. You could create characters, backgrounds, plot it out, and you know what you want to do with the characters. It's a different step when you actually say, all right, page one to page whatever, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to actually tell this story? All these concepts, how am I going to put it together? That was not my strong suit when I first started this book. So I've always worked with people that were more talented in that part of creativity to
Now,
actually write.
does that come from the concept of surrounding yourself around talented people? Does that come from your days in a band?
I mean, it could very well. I mean, yeah. So one thing we didn't cover is, like, right after I launched Reaper Destroyer the very first time at the conventions or whatever, I actually ended up getting into the music world, which throughout my life, like, we talked a lot about art, but I also, what I didn't mention is there was a secondary love that I had, which was music. And I always grew up around people in the small town I grew up in. I met one of my best friends at the time that was just a great natural talent at guitar. And then I met another guy through him that was just a natural talent at drums. It was just crazy in a small town. You find these guys who were just extremely talented. And we were always forming bands and always playing music. So when I wasn't drawing, especially we're talking about later teen years, like when you're getting into 16, 17 years old, you're more independent, you're driving around and all that kind of stuff. I got more into music. So throughout most of my life, it's always been my first love is drawing, my second love is music. Uh, I happened to have an opportunity in like 2008 where I joined a band. Some of my friends were a very successful local band, and they're forming a new band. So I joined it. It was a period in my life that I was kind of just transitioning from like the comic book stuff and just getting more into music. and ended up having a very successful music career for about 10 years, being an independent touring band, going all across the country,
Give him a shout out.
writing
What was the name of the band?
The name of the band was Mine Enemies Fall. I don't know if you can see this, but yeah, it's I still have all the shirts. Most of my apparel is still like band stuff. If you look at me from before 2009 or 2008, 2009, I was probably wearing normal clothes, and after that it was just all band shirt and like black shirts and stuff like that. But yeah, within the music, it's cool because we were a group of 5 guys, and when you're writing music, everybody has their part. I was the front man, the singer. I wrote all the lyrics and stuff like that. But you had to rely on the guitarist to bring the guitar riffs and the drummer to do what they do, and put it all together. So it was always a team effort to make something the best it absolutely could be. Um,
So you
Getting
already
back,
understand the con. That's basically putting
yeah,
a
yeah,
creative team together,
exactly, yeah.
and creating a product.
Yeah, yeah, and that's basically when I decided to kind of retire from music. I was getting a little bit older. I was getting ready to settle down and start a family. I
Dude,
knew that
10
wasn't.
years touring is rough,
Oh, dude,
right?
it's like a single man's game. It's a young single man's game, and that's really what it was. And for the majority of the time I was in the band, I was, I was in and out of not really serious relationships, but you're out on the road, like you were doing stuff, you're touring all the time. And when you weren't touring, you were doing the weekend gigs, and it was just go, go, go for 10 years. A decade of my life just doing it. And and again, it's partying, right? Most of the time I was in the band, I was in my mid to late 20s, early 30s. You're doing just a lot of stuff that's not really the most healthy lifestyle to live, right? So when I got to a point where I was like, I want to settle down and have a family, my lifestyle is not indicative of raising a child in this environment. So I knew I wanted to make a conscious effort to kind of do something else. And at that point, I decided to come back and do my first love, which was drawing again, and I got back into comic books, and I was like, this is something. It's still creative as an artist, all around artist, like I enjoy creating music, something from nothing. And that was something that I wanted to get back into. And I just decided to do it again with creating art and creating stories. Writing lyrics is a lot like writing, a story in a way,
Yeah.
when you're it's a little bit different, but it's a lot like in the same way. So um I took a lot of the philosophy I had in music, which was surround yourself by the most talented people you can find, because when you have talent around you, most of the time you're going to produce something that's pretty special. And it's hard to hold talent down, so
Yeah. And it
um
makes you rise to the occasion. You have to bring your A
exactly,
game every time.
exactly. So I did that. So I was looking at looking at what I could do. I knew I could draw, and it took a couple years to get back into it and refine your talents, because just like anything, drawing is like working out. It's like a muscle. If you don't do it for a while, you kind of lose it. You got to build it back up. Get back to a spot where you were. So I took a couple years to get my talent back up and running again. And when I sat down and started thinking about Reaper Destroyer, I wanted to retool it, bring it up to like 15 years in the future kind of thing. Is just like advance it to where the story was originally, which was kind of just a base, traditional comic book story. I wanted to give a little bit more to it than what it had been. So um what I realized early on is I didn't know how to actually write the book. And I could have all these concepts and the plot of the book and all this kind of stuff and things I thought were cool, but I didn't know how to develop a character, or and do all this stuff. So I had to do all this research. I do research on like the hero's journey, and how to bring along a character and develop them through that, and like all this technique when it comes to writing. And I still didn't get to a point where I was like very super confident in telling the story. Like I'm there was a point in time where I was like, I have no idea how I want to start this book. I had like 3 different openings to the book, and I had no idea which one was the one to go with. So it wasn't until I actually started sitting down with people that actually were writers, that it opened my eyes to what writing was. And I was glad that I did it, because my whole thing, just like in music, is I want to make the book the best it possibly can be. I want it to read good. Obviously, I'm going to make it look as best as it can. And the only way you can do that is to get somebody that was more experienced in that than I was. So what was cool is you sit down with a writer, and they'll start asking you questions, which like one of the one of the first questions that was asked me was, so why should the readers care about your character? And I sat there for a second and I was like, huh. I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. Like, I mean, he's cool. We're going to do this, right? And they're like, yeah, but why are they going to care? How are you going to relate your character to your readers? And that was a big eye opening because it's something I never thought about before as an
Were
artist,
they getting at what they call like a save the cat moment, or is that what they were trying to get to? That there's supposed to be a moment in the story, well,
Mm,
usually in the first act, early on in the first act, where the character does something that causes the audience to be on their side.
right.
They call
Yeah.
this save the cat moment.
Yeah.
Was he looking for something like that? Like, what is redeemable, and how do we tell the reader this character is worth going for this journey?
Yeah, exactly. Why should the character or why should the reader care, relate, and get attached to this character? And
Yeah,
instead of just reading a couple pages and be like, the art might be cool, but the story is just, I'm not connecting with what this character's journey is going to be. Um, and so that was a big thing for me, is actually sit down and have to answer all these questions about my character and my story. And it helped so much because it actually made me think of things I had never thought about before, which was good because I was good at being and taking that and being like, okay, cool. Well, now you're saying this, yeah, let's do this. Like, oh, all these ideas started just coming out of nowhere. Where before I was just at a wall. Like, I had gone as far as I could go. Nothing was happening. But it took a writer to sit down and through a writer's mind and see well, this is what I see with your character. Am I right? Am I wrong? And then they would dictate something to me, and then I would sit and we'd go back and forth until things were flowing. So it allowed me to really open up the story and just tell them more about the character. And for instance, my character Matthew in the story suffers from PTSD from just this traumatic experience that put him into this armor. And it was something that I wanted to kind of touch on, and not because I have it or know anybody that has it. It's just it seemed like it seems like what would happen from somebody that would deal with a very traumatic instance. Like, well, how would that person go develop after that? What would their emotional feelings be? How would they deal with this? And it's like, well, I mean, honestly, I see this guy as having these instances where he has to actually struggle with something. Like, okay, boom, there's a struggle. Instead of just being, you don't want somebody that has no struggles. As you don't want the Mary Sue version of a guy hero. You want to be able to connect with the character. You want to see them be able to struggle, make mistakes if they're going to make mistakes, learn from something, overcome something. And this is all stuff that I had to learn from the writer's point of view, because at the point, mine was just kick-ass fight scenes. I
dude,
know
and
what I
they're
want
so
to do, and I
important. They're
just want
so important to
yeah.
a comic. They're so
Oh,
important, and
absolutely,
that's
yeah.
another thing that's missing from today's. You'll read a comic book, and it's like 22 pages of people talking. I
Mm,
mean, it's like where's the
yeah.
guy? Where's the guy flying through the air punching somebody in the face? That's what I'm. That's what I'm here
Right.
for. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. There's good story. It's invisible. You don't even realize it's happening until you're
Exactly.
halfway through it. But it's so hard to get there, and it really is a craft, much like how long it took you to become a good artist. And like as a writer, I've gone through the same thing. You take 6 months of your life putting this thing together, then you go put it in a competition, put it in a film festival, sit in an audience. It's a comedy and nobody laughs.
Oh, yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
okay, well then that would miss. Then when I finally got to Lion Killer, um, everything was honed because I'd gone through all the I'd paid all those dues. I'd had all those bad showings, all those bad screenings,
Right.
gave scripts and people tore them apart. So by the time I get to Lion Killer, I mean, I'm sitting in the audience and people are laughing when I want to laugh. They're gasping when I want them to gasp. It's like,
Nice.
as a writer, man, it takes so much time and it's such a hard process.
Yeah.
But it seems like you are smart enough to really surround yourself with good people.
Thank you. And it's one thing is just I have somewhat of an ego. It's going back to the music. You always in my band days, when we would walk into a venue, whether we were on tour or doing a weekend warrior thing, I always wanted to walk in there knowing that we were going to kick everybody else's butt that was going to be playing. Regardless if I knew the people and I liked them and they were good, I was like, no matter what, when we walk in there, people are going to remember us, not you guys. And that's nothing against you, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to put the best product out there, and we're going to make people remember us. that's just a mentality I brought into doing comic books too. Is like when people pick up the book, I want them to remember that they read Reaper Destroyer, from the art that we're gonna do, the way the book's gonna look, the professional look of the book, the feel of the book, and then obviously the story that's gonna keep you there and want you to buy the next book when it comes out. Like it's it's definitely an ego thing. It's a friendly competition. You know, I'm very competitive with everybody else that I see. I want everybody to do well, but at the same time, I still want to do better. You know, and that's, to me, that's the way it should be. You know.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this, and I can relate because, like I was saying before we started recording, I did hip hop for years. Same
Yeah.
thing, even if it was on the same song. If I was like doing a collab with some guys I've known for 15 years, bro, when I'm done with this verse, you're gonna be sorry you asked me to collab. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that was everybody's mentality. Everybody's trying to one up the next person, but we all loved each other at the same time.
Exactly.
Do you think that kind of um, friendly, competitive nature, you think that's missing in today's comic books?
Like in the mainstream
No,
stuff.
mainstream, yeah, in the
Yeah.
mainstream.
Oh, I think so. I think the best you saw comics in the day were, you know, when Image formed, because it took Marvel and DC that already had a competition with each other for years, but it was pretty much just like DC did their thing, Marvel did their thing. Marvel was always going to be one, DC was always going to be two, and they just kind of got like in this rut. Image comes along and explodes, and becomes number two publisher overnight for a couple months or whatever. It really challenged all of the industry to reevaluate what they were doing, and now there was competition again. And what happened? You had some fantastic stories in the 90s told because of this competition. You Death of Superman, breaking a Batman back, Wolverine gets an adamantium ripped out, you know, Age of Apocalypse, like all this kind of stuff sparked because all of a sudden there was competition. Now you couldn't just rest on your laurels. You had to really put out the best work that you could put out. Now I just don't see I don't see that. I don't see the competition. You know, everyone's more obsessed and worried about the movies. You know, and the movies are what's making Disney money and making
It's
what
such a
is it, Warner
gilded
Brothers
cage,
now, or
man.
whoever owns DC now. That's what's making the money. The comic books are just like the ugly stepchild, you know, that's keeping the IPs alive, you know, essentially. Yeah, I don't see competition within the comic book industry anymore. You know, they're not worried about what the other companies are doing. I do see competition in the indie scene, and it reminds me so much of the music scene, where we uh respect and appreciate one another. We want to see that person succeed, and we're very happy when they do succeed. But at the same point, you also want to crush them in a certain way. Be like, oh man, you did so well. Wait until you see my book. You know, like, oh, people loved your book. Wait until I drop what I'm dropping, you know, kind of thing. You
Yeah,
know, and I see that in a rising tide lifts all ships is a
absolutely.
phrase that people use a lot, but it's true. It's the absolute truth, because if I produce something good, I'm extremely happy with it, and it gets a good response, and then the next guy comes and does better than me and gets a giant response, I'm going to be clapping, but at the same time, I'm going to be pissed off. I'm going to be like, man, I need to top that. And next time I come out, I'm going to top that, and I'm going to take the crown back, kind of thing. Yeah, like that's the mentality I see. And
A fighter's mentality,
yeah, and the people that benefit are the readers. You know, like the comic book readers are going to benefit because people are always going to be putting, or should be putting their best foot forward in everything that they do.
Yeah. So tell me, so go a little more in depth with Reaper Destroyer.
Well, Reaper Destroyer is it's a throwback to pretty much everything I loved in the 90s. It was basically a brain dump when I was retooling the story. I looked at what I didn't see in the industry anymore, and I wanted to give that kind of back, especially I mean, some people might not know that. I mean, some people might know that I'm a Comicsgate creator. The Reaper Destroyer book isn't. I don't promote it as a Comicsgate book because I've got a lot of non-Comicsgate guys on the book. It's just an independent book. You know, like my personal thoughts and my personal thoughts and all that kind of stuff. But I saw certain things I wasn't seeing even in independence anymore, that I wanted to kind of bring back, and that was my love for the dark anti-hero characters like Spawn or the Darkness. And yeah, we're seeing versions of Moon Knight now, but you know, like, you know, old school Moon Knight, Ghost Rider, the Guyver, that kind of stuff. And I took all the pop culture stuff I grew up with in the 90s, that I loved at the time, whether it was Immortals, Ninjas. Uh, it took a lot of the biblical things I was into at the time too, like fallen angels and things of that nature. And I just tried to figure out a way to put it all into one story and put it into one book. It took me 2 years to figure out how to do that. It was not easy, but I finally figured it out how to do it. So basically, my character Matthew Walker is locked in an ancient or in a locked in a struggle with an ancient spirit of death over the supernatural armor. Basically, he's imprisoned in this armor, and there's a mortal race of humans that are trying to capture that power for their own will. But one of them is resurrecting this ancient evil that is going to threaten all of the earth, and only the Reaper Destroyer, which is Matthew and the Spirit's combined efforts, are going to have enough to be able to take out this actual evil. It's a story that's very much rooted in conspiracy, if that's what you want to say. If anyone gets into conspiracies, which I dabbled into quite a bit when I was into music, um, for a number of years, a lot of extracurricular mind altering things I was into at the time. It got me down the path of conspiracies, and it really paved the way to putting a cool story together with uh okay, whatever. Everyone's heard of Illuminati, right? We all know
Yeah.
the Illuminati and stuff. So when I got into stuff like that, I really wanted to dive into what would it be like if an immortal group of characters were controlling the events of the earth behind this, or the world behind the scenes. Basically the puppet masters directing the lives of everyone for their own purpose, whether it's riches and all that kind of stuff and control. So I dove into that, and it's really kind of formed my story around this group of characters called the Elder Sons, who were the original inhabitants of the earth, who worked behind the scenes, posed as ancient gods, posed as the pantheon of Greek and Roman gods and all this kind of stuff, were emperors with the royal bloodlines throughout the history that basically treated regular humans as cattle. Um, and the Reaper Destroyer was their ultimate weapon back in the day, which was the spirit of death that they could summon and possess one of their own and use it as a weapon to control all of mankind. Well, that power just disappeared a long, long time ago before the current race of humans ever existed, and they had to result then to the normal ways of conquering, which was war or manipulation, shadow governments, and all that kind of stuff. And now all of a sudden, the newest Reaper Destroyer has just mysteriously appeared in modern day, and there is a race of this mortals groups to try to get that power to obtain it again, so that they can exact control over the world once again and control, establish dominance, which they have not been able to do for hundreds of thousands of years. Like I said, it's got a lot of fun action, a lot of nods to the 90s, I guess I could say, in the funnest way that I could make it happen. It's not a period piece book. It's not meant to be a 90s book. But my influences are very much the fun action stories of the 90s. So you're gonna have a lot of that feel within the book when you read it. But I hope that the story is a little bit more modern day, makes you think, twists and turns, the way I've developed it, the X-Files trust no one kind of feel to kind of, again, 90s reference. I'm sorry, I'm 40 years old. I'm gonna throw out all these. If yeah, if you're watching this podcast and you're like X-Files, what's that? It's
That
just,
about
again, it's
Malcolm X?
yeah, it's just yeah. It's everything that I loved about the 90s. But again, I think it was an era that was fun storytelling. And I want to have this be a fun book. Like, I want you to read this book and be entertained. It's not Shakespeare. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. It's just I want to give a good, entertaining story with fun art. And so far, the feedback I've gotten on the book has been really great. I put out an ash can earlier this year. It was just a 6-page preview with some breakdowns and stuff, and of the overall story.
Was it inked in
Uh,
color?
well, it was inked. It was inked. It was a black and white version of the book, just to kind of get it out there. Because, again, going back to the 90s, when ash cans were a big thing at cons, you always got like these black and white
Hmm.
previews of the books that are going to be coming out in the fall or next year, whenever they were, and they were always black and white with the script. And I wanted to do something like that, just kind of an old feel for collectors. Like, 6 of the pages was the first scene of the book with a full script that I put out there. So it's and then there was a sketch section, like character sketches, and I did a character breakdown, a story breakdown within the ash can too, so we could give you just a good idea what the book is going to be about. Because a lot of times when I talk about the book, I tend to ramble on about certain things. Like I get so excited about talking about it that a lot of times I'm like, well, I shouldn't say that. Like, how am I going to get around that? Because I want
Don't give them too
whatever I'm
much.
going to tell you is going to be way too much, and I'm going to give stuff away.
Well,
Uh,
I'm asking because I'm currently working on a comic project with Ebi Canalis from Iron Sights, the artist from Iron Sights.
oh yeah.
Yeah. And I've heard a few of the other CG creators mention, hey, we put out an ash can that really helped to sell the you know the full comic. Do you recommend
Yeah.
that?
Oh, I absolutely do. I think most of the success, not most, but a good part of the success I had with the campaign was because I put something out 6 months before the campaign dropped, and it was out long enough to where I could get it in people's hands, and I could start getting feedback. People could start posting reviews on YouTube or just social media, letting people know that it was out there, talking about how much they liked it, and it helped create buzz and hype for the actual campaign. Because that's a big help when you can have buzz already starting instead of just saying like, "Hey, this is coming," and talk about it. You can actually have other people saying now like, "Hey, I bought this, I read this, I really liked it, I can't wait for the book." Getting that kind of statements out there on a regular basis really helps, getting other people excited. I think I charged like $20 free shipping for it. And after a month, I closed it off, and whoever signed up for it, I took that and got that many printed with extras printed over, for, damaged books or whatever, but that was basically it. So it was a rare correct collector's thing also. So much so that the first time I did it, when people started seeing it get reviewed and people posting that they got it, there were so many people that didn't even know that I did it that started hitting me up and wanting some. So I ended up doing like a second chance version of the ash can and did it again, and it had a lot of success that way too. So all together, two different times I sold the ash can, just built that hype. Like there was the first hype, and then that grew into that second campaign, so to speak, hype, and then that all just kind of culminated into the actual campaign when we launched in May.
So we only got a few minutes left here. So any last words?
Just, I mean, the biggest life lesson is kind of cliche, but just never give up on anything you want to do. I've always been someone that's pursued the quote unquote pipe dreams in life. Like everyone's like, oh, don't go for music, don't go for this, don't go for that, because it'll never work out. Well, my music career was fine. I'm extremely happy with what we did in the music career, and I'm extremely happy with what we're doing right now. And it's all because I've had the determination to continue going forward when other people said not to, And so just don't ever stop. If you're passionate about something, push through all of the roadblocks, because they're gonna come. The discouragements are gonna come. It's gonna happen. But if you got the determination, do it, because there's something very fulfilling about sitting here now, even at 40 years old, looking back at the 14-year-old me that was for sure thinking I was the next Jim Lee and gonna blow up the industry. But I can just be like, regardless, I made it to a point now where I'm making comic books. I'm making comic books, and that's what more can you say? That's an awesome thing to say. Like, I'm a comic book creator now. It took me a while, but I got here. So just continue. God bless me with a beautiful daughter and a wife, and a nice home, and the ability to do my passions and my loves, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now. So
Well, I can't wait to get my copy of Reaper Destroyer. I just want to thank you for being on the podcast today, man, and hopefully we'll stay connected.
absolutely, man. Thank you for having me on. This was a blast.
And that's my interview with the fascinating Joe Sonntag. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Joe M. Sonntag. You can also follow his YouTube channel, Joe M. Sonntag, as well. You can also follow me on Twitter at Derrick Fury to stay up to date with what's going on with me and Ebi Canalis collaborating on the new graphic novel, The Gentleman's Guild. And don't forget to watch Lion Killer, my debut feature film. That's right, I made a movie. It's called Lion Killer. It stars Regina Ting Chen, who's currently on season 4 of Stranger Things. You can watch it at Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, Freevee, the Roku channel, or you can pop on over to the YouTube channel called V Movies. And thanks for watching this episode of FURYCAST. Make sure you comment below, like, subscribe, and of course, smash that bell so you could be notified every time a FURYCAST video drops. Till next time, peace.